Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 27th of June, 2022. And on today's show, we are discussing a question from one of our listeners. Who is your favorite player to watch from each Big 12 team since 2010? I have mine. I asked some other folks in the Big 12 universe for theirs as well from each team. So today, that's what we're doing. Favorite player to watch since 2010 for each Big 12 team. That's coming up and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Locked On Big 12 podcast, Josh Neighbors here. You guys can follow me on Twitter. There it is, at Josh Neighbors. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can also find the show wherever you get your podcast, and you guys can find us, as I mentioned, on YouTube, also at LO Big 12 on Twitter. Thank you all for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Today's show, we are brought to you by our friends at BetOnline and betonline.net. Fun week on the show coming up. We have our usual crossover, which always has great conversations. We have this episode, we're talking about the 10 most fun players to watch, or favorite players to watch in the Big 12. And also, Robbie Triano and I, both of SiriusXM, we got ballots for all Big 12 preseason. So, I'm somebody who I believe, I'm not sure everybody has to release their vote or whatever. I'm somebody that believes that they should, I'm not that saying everybody needs to know what I'm doing, but look, this stuff comes out. If I'm a voting member, I should defend what I'm doing. I should explain to you all why I'm doing it. You guys know I explain a lot of my reasoning, but I'm going to come on here, show you all my ballot, explain my ballot. Robbie's going to do the same thing. And look, you guys know, this podcast is 5 days a week for 9 months of the year, 3 days a week for the other 3. I pay attention to a lot of Big 12 sports, talk to a lot of people. Robbie, is the main producer on a show that is 5 days a week, just like ours, most of the year. And, he's living the Big 12 life, talking to people every single day. He's been a guest before in this show. So he and I are talking about our ballots. You don't have to agree, you don't have to agree with ours. But I'm going to put it out there. I've done research on mine, and I feel pretty comfortable about where I am with my ballot. So I'll let you all see what I put out there. Robbie and I will talk about why we made the choices that we made. That should be fun as well. But I have to give one of our listeners a lot of credit here. So I put out our last mailbag, and I hope you guys also send us stuff as well. Continue to send us those questions. Sam Bushert, sorry if I messed it up, Sam. Oklahoma State fan, loyal listener to the show, really appreciate him. Says, how about your favorite player to watch from each Big 12 team since 2010? This is an excellent question. I really like this question because it gives you that, best of all time GOAT is really difficult to do in so many sports because the way the sport changes. Football has changed a lot in the last 12 years, but this kind of makes it, there's modern era, and then this is super modern era, right? This is the last 10 to 12 years. This is, everybody's kind of playing the spread offenses. This is wide open Big 12. It also encapsulates some of the more recent, more defense and running game oriented Big 12 as well. So I broke this list up into a few ways. Drake Toll from Locked On Baylor gave me his thoughts. I got Williams over at Locked On Sooners. Linda Godfrey, our old friend from Locked On Pokes. She's no longer with the company, but she gave me her thoughts. Steven Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs gave me his for TCU. Emery Lida from Locked On Red Raiders. Jonathan Davis from Locked On Longhorns. And I talked to some people about West Virginia as well and got some of their thoughts too. So I've broken this up. I've got the slam dunks, of which there are 3. And actually I got some pushback on that, but I think there are 3. Slight competition, of which there are 3. And then decisions, 1, 2, 3, 4 on this list. So let's go with the slam dunks. My first slam dunk at Baylor, and this is not in any particular order. Baylor, it's Robert Griffin. That was my first one that I thought of. And then also conferring with Drake Toll. He says mine starts with Robert Griffin and ends with 1, 2, and 3 is what he said to Us. Yeah, I mean, look, 08, 09 were his freshman and sophomore seasons, but really RG3, the experience is 2010, 2011, amazing years for him. Obviously, a Heisman Trophy winner in 2011, 37 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on the season, threw for over 4,200 yards. And in 2012 or 2011, excuse me, ran for 700 yards and 10 touchdowns as well. As somebody who is a fan of the now Washington Commanders, then Washington Redskins in 2012, they drafted him, and it was a really exciting time. And he is a player that's really interesting because, and I know this is talking about college, but you think about his pro career, like he was having success. I mean, there was a way that it worked with him and Alfred Morris, and the offensive line was really good, and Kyle Shanahan's a genius, and that stuff all worked, but like Robert's talent had to be there. There he's not some system quarter, like it's not like some system. It was a system designed for him, but at some point your talent has to work, right? There's a system designed for Lamar, but like at some point he's got to be really good in all of these games. And I know the debate about whether Lamar Jackson's elite is up there, but like Robert Griffin III, that last stretch that he put together, man, that winning streak they went on, and him getting injured, his career changes in that Washington versus Seattle game. Really interesting turning point career game for both Russell Wilson and RG3, who are both, in the same draft class. It changes because of that injury, but like because of the skills he had, he was a dynamic player in college. You go back and watch those highlights, they're tremendous. He's a dynamic player in his, in when he was at the peak of his powers in the professional ranks. And so watching him was one of those it was must watch television. It was pencil that in, Baylor, pencil in Baylor football. It's going to be electric. It's going to be fun. Maybe the defenses weren't the best, yes, but still the electricity, what he brought was absolutely phenomenal. So RG3 is a pencil in. I'm going Iowa State next, just for the sake of alphabetical order. Some pushback on this one. Hearing thunder outside. I went with Breece Hall. And John Williams wanted me to go with Hakeem Butler. I went with Breece Hall because you just look at those, and this is to watch, and it's not just a numbers thing. But you think about him at Iowa State, that streak of consecutive games with touchdowns he had. He averaged over 130 yards per game in his career, scored 56 touchdowns in 3 seasons, and he was consistent at a position where, sure, you're getting consistent touches, but also you're getting consistently hit and banged up. And he was such a consistent player, time in, time out, game in, game out. You could trust that Breece Hall was going to be there and was going to deliver, and did so often. And honestly, he's one of those guys where you think about, what we watched, like an honor and a pleasure. And I don't know, I think this is true. If you guys feel differently, let me know in the comments. There's a big part of me that feels like we did not appreciate Breece Hall fully because of the way that the last season went down for Iowa State. They were supposed to be a lot better than they were. And I think that caused a lot of people to say, or to maybe not look at his season as much, because you look at the 2020 he had, right? 12 games, 279 carries, 1572 on the ground, 21 touchdowns, 2 receiving. And then you look in 2022 and, 100 less. I'll actually tell you this. So the receiving category, 23 recs for 180 and 2 scores in 2020. In 2021, his season was 253 carries, 1,472 yards, so 100 yards less than the previous year, but still actually averaging 0.2 more yards per carry, 20 touchdowns, so 1 less than the year previous, but 36 receptions, so 13 more than previous season, 302 yards, 120 more than the previous season, 8.4 yards per reception, which is better than the season before, and 3 scores, which is better than the season before. Also ended up with 23 touchdowns, same as the season before, ended up with 22 more yards, than the season before, and averaged 6.1 yards per touch from the line of scrimmage. So statistically, actually, his season last year, 2021, was better. Now, look, it got overlooked once again because of what happened with Iowa State, but I still feel like watching him was a pleasure just because of the consistency. Like, they're going to miss him, man. It's hard. A guy like that, people are so excited about him in the NFL, but it was just, you could pencil him in, it felt like, for 100 and a score every single week, and sometimes 102 scores. It felt like you could pencil him in for a spectacular player, great season, obviously Breece Hall. And so Hakeem Butler, I get it. I get it a bit more flashy. I think kind of, guy who can make some big catches for you, right? I'm going with Breece Hall on that one. All right, third guy that we've got. This is the last guy in our slam dunks. Patrick Mahomes, right? His numbers in just 3 years at Texas Tech are insane. And once again, I know it's not just numbers, but this, you have to think, like, 93 touchdown passes in 32 games, 22 rushing touchdowns, third all-time passer on the Texas Tech list, and just watch the game. I mean, like, sure, the defenses that he's going against were bad, but he made them look bad. He had to light them up, and he lit them up all the time. And you saw so much. I think a lot of people probably go back and watch that, and you think about it, like, think about the time that we were in and we watched that. It was wild. It was unpredictable. It was, are we sure this kind of guy translates to the next level? Now, obviously, he gets to go to a perfect situation, gets an offensive coordinator like Eric Bieniemy down the road. He gets a head coach in Andy Reid who knows what he's doing. He gets weapons in Tyreek Hill, gets weapons in Travis Kelce, and a bunch of guys. The backfield's not like amazing, but the offensive line was really good as well. And they get a couple other wide receiver options. Obviously, Sammy Watkins comes in there. So, perfect situation, everything. But like, we should have seen it coming, right? I think his surge just felt like it was unknown, untapped potential. But like, this guy could do it all, coming into the league, and gets the year to sit, obviously, by Alex Smith. But he gets to learn the behind the scenes stuff. He could have done that stuff year one, just because Texas Tech's offense, like, there's some things about the air raid where you feel like, is this guy making every single throw in the book? Sure, at times, but it's a bit more protected, and there's not a whole lot of thinking because the concepts, there's not a ton of them, right? You're not always thinking. Like, for Patrick Mahomes, and they were really developing him, and he had to make throws on the run, right? And he was out, felt like, sure, I think the mental part of the game came along, but we should have seen that coming. I think we all should have seen that coming a bit more. Maybe some of you all did, but I thought, I'm not sure this is wrong. And look, I know he's an awful guy. I'm not a huge fan of Deshaun Watson for everything that's happening right now. I actually thought Deshaun Watson should have gone ahead of Patrick Mahomes. I think there's an argument made, hey, Deshaun goes to Kansas City, maybe it's the same results. I think Patrick's obviously a much more talented player. I think Deshaun is, upstairs in the football field as not a bit more than Patrick, but coming out of college, maybe he did just a little bit. So, I think maybe in retrospect, obviously we change our minds, but like, I'm not sure. Once again, I'm not totally sure the results are that different, but once again, like the Oklahoma game, the Texas Tech Oklahoma game, the legendary game that we had between Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes will go down in history. He's got to be on this list. All right, we'll get to the slight competition, but first, a word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline and BetOnline.net. Whether it's you guys want to bet on the College World Series, which is wrapping up. I'm recording this on Sunday, so we'll see if Oklahoma can extend the College World Series to a game number 3. Whether it's that, whether you guys want to bet on golf, football futures, whatever it is, they've got it at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. You guys go there today, sign up. It's free to do. When you guys do that, you can find all the different odds. They've got Vegas casino games, everything going on there at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. All right, so the slight competition. I've got Ben Heaney from Kansas playing linebacker because 226 tackles through 3 seasons is ridiculous. And he was a really good player that just stood out to you when you watched. A guy who was always around the football, and on a team that did not have much direction. Ben Heaney felt like he was just kind of a solid piece. There's not a whole lot to go off of there, though, at KU over the last 12 years. So I'll keep that one short, but Ben Heaney is the one stuck out to me the most. At Kansas State, let's go there next. To me, my favorite player to watch from Kansas State, it was Tyler Lockett. If you look at Tyler Lockett on the Kansas Kansas State all-time list, like, it's ridiculous. I mean, his name is on receptions, touchdowns, yards, all that kind of stuff. And in college, maybe this is another one of those guys where you watched him in college, 5'11", 175. So maybe we should have known this was coming more. 3rd round pick, 69th overall. Such a good receiver. Just knew how to use. It was great in space. You've seen him now in the NFL. Is really good at getting open. A really strong route runner, and also not bad down the field as well. This is a guy who is an excellent, excellent wide receiver. And honestly, we should have seen his success in the NFL coming more than I think that we saw. 3rd round, yeah, that's a lot of receivers go. His size, I think, kept him from the top of the board. But I would say Tyler Lockett at Kansas State definitely has to be on this list. Maybe you want to say Deuce Vaughn, slight competition. That's why they're in the slight competition category. Maybe you want to roll with Deuce Vaughn. I'm not there on that. I'm going to stick with Tyler Lockett on this. And Deuce Vaughn's career is not over, so he's got time to go up there. But Tyler Lockett's a lot of fun to watch in an offense that wasn't always fun to watch. Really good player. Texas, Sam Ehlinger. So I was actually talking with Jonathan Davis about this. He mentioned Bijan Robinson, but Sam Ehlinger is fun to watch, favorite player to watch in a different way than a Kyler Murray is, in a different way than a Baker maybe a little bit actually more similar to Baker Mayfield. Is like Kyler is smooth, and we'll get to him in a little bit. Everything, absolute stud. Everything he's doing. There's a bit more of a grind it. There's a lot more of a grind it factor because Sam Ehlinger is not as talented of a passer. He was also run oriented. He did battle through a lot of injuries. It wasn't always successful, and so I think my favorite player to watch from Texas was him, just because of the way he put it all out there all the time. And sure, the Texas back thing happened and didn't succeed as much maybe as we thought he should. But I think, I'm not sure he's a great quarterback. Like, to be like he's a really good college quarterback. I'm not sure I'd call him great. And I think they ran him far too much. I think that it cost him a lot because he was injured a lot of the time. But he's a player, man, that when you think about Sam Ehlinger and what he gave out there is something great to watch about max effort all of the time. That's why he's on this list. All right, decisions. When I talked to John Williams about who should be on the Oklahoma list, he gave me, a laundry list, I guess you could say, of guys that could be on there and that could go. He hit me. He said the first thing he said to me was, "Man, that is a tough question to answer for him." But he said, I think eventually Kyler Murray was the guy. He said Baker Mayfield, but also CeeDee Lamb, Kyler Murray as well. So I went with Kyler because the way he was able to, things like escaping, right? And I think, once again, let's go back to this. His agent's amazing. The fact that Oakland A's drafted him as high as they did, and I'll get the compensation back for it, I believe. But the fact that they got a pick back, the fact that he was drafted so high and still able to play football, his ability to avoid punishment was one of the most fascinating and really impressive things about his game. He puts it a bit more on the line now that he's in the pros and makes a lot more reckless decisions. He made some reckless decisions, but especially with running, he's just so skilled and was so skilled, especially in college, with making his way out of bounds, with getting certain place in the field, with avoiding, vicious contact, things like that. So that's why I love watching Kyler Murray play. That's why I put him over. CeeDee Lamb so smooth. He's kind of the same way as a wide receiver. I'm just putting Kyler Murray there because I love the entire game that he had, and the baseball story too made it great. Oklahoma State, there's several wide receivers. I went with James Washington because Junkyard James Washington, great nickname, obviously, but also just a dog. I mean, a guy who was willing to go up there and get footballs, not physically the best guy in the world, but just a grinder who was so much fun to watch, play in and play out. Big play threat, could get, you need to move the chains, the guy get the sticks as well. I mean, Junkyard James Washington, fantastic player. Loved watching him. Obviously, I've also thought about Tylan Wallace as well for this list. Justin Blackmon gets thrown in there as well, but part of Justin Blackmon's career also for him is pre-2010. So he has a 20 touchdown season in 2010, but his first year was in 2009. But while he was a much better wide receiver, I would say that I enjoyed watching James Washington. Like, this is the one where this is not me picking the better player. I'm picking James Washington because I just enjoyed watching him more. Justin Blackmon was the better player. Do not get me wrong. But I just enjoyed watching James Washington. That's just me though. And that's just my bias because I think I was 13 around that time watching, watching James Blackmon. So I'm picking the guy, the grinder that I can appreciate more. Once again, Justin Blackmon, the better player. Another wide receiver on this list, Josh Doxson at TCU. Plenty of defensive players that we could pick here, but Steven Simcox said he wanted Josh Doxson, another player that I have a complicated relationship with. The reason why he is on here is just a tremendous player. I mean, this guy was a first-round talent, came into the league and remained that, or show that he was a first-round talent. Did not when he made the NFL, but a fantastic wide receiver. And the fact that Josh Doxson is the guy that Steven Simcox went towards on a team where, generally speaking, we're known for their defense, I think that says something about how good of a player that he was. Last guy that we're going to hit here, Tavon Austin. All right. Tavon Austin was fantastic at West Virginia. And I'm going to shout out here our guy, Justin Walker, who gave me this recommendation here. Tavon Austin was a fantastic offensive player and has really managed to stay in the pros much longer than I think we all thought he would because of that speed. He's still on the Buffalo Bills. They just signed him this offseason. Maybe not what we thought would happen for him in the professional career, but because of the speed that he brings to the table, he had, and those years he had at West Virginia were fantastic. I mean, think about the seasons that he had, as a junior, 2011, over 1,000 receiving yards and over 100 receptions and 8 touchdowns. Also ran for 182 yards. Then his senior season, 1,289 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns, 643 rushing yards on 72 attempts. It was kind of almost a horse. Also took a kick back for a touchdown, took a punt back for a touchdown that season. An amazing player and maybe one of the, probably the best single season that a West Virginia player has had in the last, decade or so was that Tavon Austin senior season. So we got him there. All right, let us know what you guys think of these. I want to get your thoughts. This is not the end of this conversation. We'll be talking more about this as we head into the week. We'll also be talking with the Big 12 crew on Tuesday night about this, but just wanted to lay out who I have right here. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LLBig12. You guys can follow me at JoshNeighbors_. Till next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.